Okay, so I think we can probably begin. All right, so welcome everyone. Welcome to everyone who's new this week, and welcome back to everyone who's been joining us for the past couple of weeks. So before we begin, I would like to acknowledge and pay respect to the traditional custodians on all the lands on which we are meeting on today, and pay respect to elders past, present and emerging. So welcome to our third Nursing and Midwifery webinar series focused on rural and remote. And this session is Life as a Rural and Remote New Grad. So welcome to everyone. And as with our other sessions, here tonight I have Chris Russell, the Future Workforce Manager with me, who will probably pop in a little bit later and help me out with the Q&A. But for those of you who don't know me, my name is Pip Kensett. I come from a rural and remote nursing background myself. But I'm also the program lead here at the New South Wales Rural Doctors Network, and I'm very, very happy to be providing this service to you all and showcasing some amazing speakers to inspire you to undertake a nursing and midwifery career in the bush. So first up, I'll actually go through some housekeeping. Before we begin, as with the other sessions and as we're sort of doing at the moment, we'll probably encourage you to use the chat function rather than the Q&A, and feel very welcome and free to post questions or comments as you have been in the other weeks, and ask anything of our speakers. They've all been recent grads, or some of them just finished, some of them still studying, maybe doing their midwifery. You'll hear all about that later, but it will be a great opportunity for you guys to really find out what it's like, and make sure you ask all those questions that you have been thinking about as you lead up to your applications in a few weeks. Okay, so I think that's it really. We can probably start. So first up tonight, we're hearing from Harry Clout. So Harry has recently finished his grad, and he's working out in Broken Hill as a registered nurse in the emergency department. Harry grew up on the South Coast and has always been quite passionate about nursing, following his cousin's work in the area. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Harry to tell you a little bit about himself.
G'day guys. Yeah, as Pip said, I'm from the south coast of New South Wales and have been a nurse for 1 year and 4 months. I finished my new grad doing 6 months in Wilcannia and 6 months in the Broken Hill Emergency Department in Feb, and I've been permanently employed since then. I like traveling around a fair bit, and that's what drew me to the profession. My family friend actually is a remote area nurse, and hearing about what he does for work and seeing where he travels is pretty awesome. So I studied Cert 3 and 4 in aged care and really enjoyed it. So went straight on to do my Bachelor of Nursing and went from there. And here I am 4 and a bit years later.
Fantastic, Harry. So can you tell us a little bit about what inspired you to go bush in the first place? You know, you said your cousin, but what else was it?
Well, Batemans Bay is a kind of an inner regional town anyway, and it's got a tiny little hospital. And if me and my friends or any of my family needed anything, it was interesting seeing how far we had to travel, even though we were 120 k's from Canberra to get healthcare. My school friend's mum was actually the manager of the local ED as well, and I thought her job was pretty cool, and the stuff that she did was awesome. So I kind of wanted to go a little bit further rural and remote than my hometown of Batemans Bay. So I kind of followed that route. Led me to do a couple of undergrad placements in the area while studying in Batemans Bay and then at Wollongong at UOW. Yeah, and after meeting some awesome people out west, specifically in Denton and Broken Hill, I kept going.
Fantastic. And what did you find was the main difference between your placements maybe in Batemans Bay or in Sydney or wherever else and being out in Broken Hill? And why did you think that you'd have a better opportunity or experience out bush compared to where you were on the coast?
Strangely enough, in the city, even though there's a lot more resources, like I can only draw from one placement I did on a surgical ward in Liverpool and 2 placements I did in Wollongong Hospital. even though there was more support logistically with facilitators and educators, clinical and nurse educators, I felt more supported in the rural areas. Even though I had one facilitator, one nurse that I hung around with as a preceptor, I felt a lot more supported, and I thought I could utilise my student scope a lot more in those placements specifically. I think I learned the most from Broken Hill Medical Ward when I was there for 4 weeks actually, and that was straight into my second year. I was actually that's when I really knew that nursing was for me actually.
Fantastic. I think it's really interesting you talk about the support there. I know that throughout the weeks, and a lot of our participants here tonight have spoken about their worries around support. Can you tell us a little bit about the support and the supervision you had when you were a new grad?
So just as I touched on, logistically, there is less support or resources that are meant to support. So I know there's 3 clinical nurse educators for the hospital in Broken Hill, whereas I know I believe there was 3 in the ICU, or actually probably more than that in the ICU in Wollongong when I did a placement there. Although the educators that I have out here, I see them all the time, and I actually get a lot of my supervision and support from senior colleagues, which is one thing I've found across all regional, rural and remote placements, which is very different to what I had in the metro placements and the inter-regional ones.
Yeah, that's great. We actually had another session last night separate to this webinar series, and they talked about that you often need to be your own advocate and find supervision if something's not there handed to you on a plate. And I like that you mentioned your seniors and your team and how often experience, even though they're not in that education role, how they end up being a bit of a mentor and sort of educator to you. So I think that's really important. What was it like out in the remote sites compared to being in the base hospital? Can you tell us a little bit about what your life was like? Where did you live? What a normal day might look like, whether it was how well resourced, that sort of thing, just for the guys listening who may not really know what it's like in those remote sites where you're really serviced by just nurses in the absence of a doctor.
Yeah, so Wilcannia was my first placement. It was really interesting. I lived on the hospital grounds in the hospital accommodation. Luckily, it was free, which was really good. So I would, let's say I was working a morning shift, I'd walk out of work. I'd be at the nurse station in less than 90 seconds. I'd only see kangaroos on the walk to work, maybe an echidna some days. So would start work, see the residents that lived at the multi-purpose centre there, and often, usually most days, we'd get a visitor through the emergency department as well. I was on with usually one senior registered nurse and usually one senior enrolled nurse, and me as the new grad. We were kept pretty busy for the 6 months there, and I just felt awesome support from the seniors. Specifically, interestingly in Wilcannia, it was the senior enrolled nurses that were really, really supportive inside and outside of work, but the senior registered nurses were really good for clinical things and professional support. And then after work, usually it would be because there was multiple accommodations in Wilcannia for nurses. Most of the nurses that work there live in hospital accommodation. We weren't sure most days who was having a fire and a bush cook-up, whether it was at our place or across the road or up the street. And if usually nothing was going on, we'd either make ourselves dinner or we'd go to the golf club, which is not too bad for a meal so far out of a big town. So, yeah.
And tell us the cuisine of the golf club. I hear it's very good.
Oh, it actually really was. We had a gentleman who'd been serving Chinese there for, I believe, over 10 years, and it was actually probably the best Chinese I've ever had. Unfortunately, he's moved to Broken Hill now, and yeah, people are actually trying to get him to start cooking again in Broken Hill, but fingers crossed. He's pretty famous actually.
He's very famous. That's why I asked, because I thought it's particularly good Chinese. So
yeah,
that's great.
Know if he starts cooking again. With support, I actually got a message from my in-charge nurse today just asking how we went, because we had a little bit of a busy day. So that's just a perfect example of what rural and remote nursing's like. It's really nice, actually.
Absolutely. No, that's a great start, Harry, and thanks for touching on those sort of remote touches and what it's like and how your day is, rather than just a normal day of hopping in the car and traveling on the M5 going to work, or what it may be like in the city. So, okay, I think we might jump over to Georgia now, and we'll probably come back to you later, Harry. So Georgia grew up on the North Shore. She studied in Sydney, and then she's always been quite drawn to the country as a result of her family's close knit sort of relationship with a few different country areas. Georgia, do you want to tell us a little bit about your experience as an RN and where it's led you to go and where you are now?
Hey everyone. So my experience as an RN, as Pip said, I'm from Sydney on the North Shore, so not very rural at all. But throughout my uni degree, I took up a few rural placements, one of them being Walgett, just because I had some family connections there. And from that placement, I kind of really grew to love the rural lifestyle and love the communities that you get to meet. So that ended up in me applying for a rural and remote exchange program for my new grad. So I ended up getting a program which was 6 months in Walgett MPS and then 6 months at Dubbo Base. So going straight out to Walgett was a bit different. Coming from like all my placements at uni mostly being in larger city hospitals, you know, you've got your big 20-bed wards or more even, and you've got your 4 patients and you've just flat chat the whole shift. And then coming out to Walgett, where it's an MPS, so it had a 2-bedded ED, 4 acute beds, I think it was 8 ward beds and then 8 residential aged care beds. So as the new grad, we got to float around throughout all the areas. Generally, if you were working on the ward, you also had the ED as well. And it was just in-charge nurse, and then myself would be the second. Often there was no doctor on site, so if anything was happening, we'd either just ring like a locum doctor and give them handover over the phone and kind of paint the picture for them to tell us or give us some guidance as to how to treat this particular person, or if it was needed, we could ring a doctor in and they could come and see us on site as well. So you have a lot of time to kind of be your own clinician and make decisions and things like that. So it was really good to see that side of thing. And a lot of the RNs out there are FLEC trained as well. So they're quite knowledgeable and can really help guide you as to, you know, what best practice was in the situations. And yeah, every day is so different. You could have nothing walk through the door, or you could have 3 cardiac patients walk through the door and not have enough beds for them. As well as that side of things, you've also got to be aware of where you are and what resources you have. So you have to be really connected to patient flow. So that's getting patients to and from smaller sites to bigger base sites and further if needed. As well as, so we get the telehealth happening, so people can camera in and see what you're doing in the ED to kind of guide you that way as well. But yeah, then from Walgett heading to Dubbo, so coming to a base site now, it was different again, just to see how different it can be, as it was a bigger site than Walgett, but smaller than say a Sydney hospital. It's quite amazing to see what we can manage out here in the West, and having that background of coming from a smaller site, so you can kind of see where patients are going and the journey that they take as well. Yeah, I think it's been eye-opening. I don't know if I'm on the right track anymore.
Yeah, no, that's great. I just want to touch on a few things you mentioned. So you were talking about a couple of your nurses were FLEC trained, and you also spoke about make the most of it and develop yourself as a clinician. And I think that sort of speaks to a little bit of your scope of practice and the autonomy you had when you were working out there. How would you advise people make the most of opportunities to learn, even though it may be quiet? How did you really embrace that chance of a quiet day, not that we use the Q word, but to really to turn it into a learning experience and to be able to know how you would take on those 4 cardiac patients, even if you didn't have enough beds. And one more thing just before is you did talk about telehealth I'm sure a lot of people listening may have never worked with telehealth. And can you explain how the doctors who may have been assisting you from thousands of kilometres away, were able to? Tell us a little bit about the resources you had there. It's very interesting.
Well, what springs to mind with the telehealth, first of all, is there's one very vivid memory I have in Walgett. A fellow walked through the emergency doors and said I had chest pain. So took him straight through, did an ECG. It came up with a NSTEMI. So the part of the protocol there was anything abnormal that we would transmit from our machine straight through to Orange. That was our cardiac base site. And then we would have a camera on the roof above the bed in ED, and we'd flick that straight on, and then our phone would ring and it would be the cardiologist from Orange straight on the phone to us, because they could see we had an emergency and we needed assistance. And lo and behold, that fella arrested in front of us. And at that point, it was just me and the RN in the hospital, so the senior RN, the in charge. So meanwhile, we were trying to get this fella back while trying to get a doctor to come in and help us. Luckily, we got help. it was a good outcome for this fella. But yeah, that was probably the most amazing thing that I've seen in regards to telehealth, was the fact that within minutes we had a base site at our beck and call, giving us instructions as to how to best care for this man. And luckily our doctor was only a few minutes away where he lived, so we had help pretty quickly. But yeah, it's amazing what technology can do. And even here in Dubbo now, I've worked in the special care nursery a bit, and we've got a camera above the neonatal resus area. And so we can get nets on the line really quickly as well, if they can assess a baby from Sydney and see if we need to transfer and fly out babies, which is quite incredible from afar.
Yeah, absolutely amazing, the technology that's around and how far things have come in such a short time. Do you want to just chat a little bit more about your scope and the autonomy, and whether you did end up doing FLEC or whether some of the nurses did FLEC, and what that means for those guys who may not know?
Yeah, so I never actually did FLEC myself, just because I was only in Walgett for 6 months and I was coming to Dubbo, and it wasn't essential for us in Dubbo. But if you were in a rural area like that and staying there, I think it would be a really good opportunity to broaden your scope as well. But if you do get yourself into a rural site, I think you've just got to really throw yourself in there and use what you've got. Use your senior nurses, they're amazing, and use all their knowledge. If it's quiet, sit down with them, talk to them, get their advice on things. I found it really helpful sitting with seniors, and we'd often go through scenarios and just, how would we play this out if it walked through the door? Just even talking something through is just some consolidation. Get yourself into some of the packages you can do. So you can always do your cannulation and your venipuncture, and which is quite fun. I think, yeah, I think rural nursing is what you make it. You kind of need to put yourself out there and say, I'll take this patient, or can I help you with this patient so I can learn? And that way, yeah, you're learning on the go, but you're not taking a back seat as well.
Yeah, fantastic. That's so good. So before we move on to Prue, so I see you're at work now. Do you want to tell the guys listening sort of what you're doing now and where you're at in your career in regard to your progression and lifelong learning?
Yeah, so I finished my new grad at the end of 2018. So I did the second half here at Dubbo Base. But the main reason I did nursing was to become a midwife. I did my nursing to get that background knowledge of humans and how they work. And then always knew that I wanted to go into the midwifery side of things. So after my new grad, well, during my new grad, I applied for the New South Wales Mid-Start program, which is for RNs to transition into registered midwives. So luckily I got accepted into that. So before I started my Mid-Start, I worked in special care nursery just to get some experience with the baby side of things, and they are amazing little humans. I love them. And then now I am one birth and a few weeks away from being a registered midwife, which is rather exciting.
Woohoo! And why are you at work at the moment?
Why am I at work at the moment? Well, I'm on shift and there's a woman in labour and I'm planning to go birth her shortly.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. Okay, I think we'll move on to Prue. Prue is a little bit further along than both these guys in terms of where she's at in her career. She undertook her new grad year in Dubbo and finished her mid-start year studying to be a midwife just at the beginning of this year, wasn't it? And or maybe it was late last year, and is currently a midwifery new grad. So Prue's going to talk about her journey as a nurse and how growing up in the country shaped her interest in and appreciation of rural health and midwifery.
Alrighty, hey guys, very nice to be here. Thanks for inviting me along. I feel very privileged to be doing this, but I am 24. I am from Walgett. I went to school in Sydney and came back to a rural town of Armidale to do uni. So I finished my registered nursing, well, Bachelor of Nursing rather, in 2017 and applied to do my new grad in Dubbo and was lucky enough to get selected there as one of the new grads and rotated through paediatrics and emergency in my first year, which was pretty bloody awesome considering, you know, 2 specialty areas in your first year is a pretty big deal. So I was very pleased with that. Growing up in Walgett and why I became a nurse, I kind of fell into it really. I hadn't really had a lot of, luckily enough, none of my family or anyone particular, or I didn't have a certain experience. So it was like, oh, I want to be a nurse for this reason or anything in particular. I had a bunch of mates who were going to uni and I went with them and they were doing nursing and I was like, I'll do it too, which is cool. And anyway, so finishing up there and doing my pracs and whatever, I was like, oh, this is actually lucky. I enjoy this sort of work because I enjoy looking after people and getting to know people and also trying to help them at their worst and get them out of hospital and see them happy and healthy again. But so going to Dubbo as my first big job as a nurse, I had absolutely no idea what I was getting myself into. I mean, I knew we used Dubbo as our centre for, you know, we'd go to the dentist and that was 3 hours away from Walgett and we'd do all of our stuff in Dubbo. So it wasn't necessarily a scary place for me to go because I had a few mates there and that sort of thing. But the hospital in itself, starting in peds was great, really, really good in the sense that pediatrics, you have to have 2 people there. Well, as me as a nurse, and you have to have the second nurse there to check everything to make sure you're, you know, not giving the wrong dose or that sort of thing because kids are so much trickier little humans than, you know, your average adult. So starting off in peds, it was really challenging because you go through your nursing career, well, at uni, thinking just trying to get onto the normal adult physiology sort of stuff. But peds, from babies, newborns to toddlers and then teenagers, the physiology is completely different. So that in general, you deal with so many different things and got to see a lot of interesting and really cool things, which was great. And nurses there are awesome. One great thing about studying in peds was the nurses are always happy, they love kids, and you know, you can't be a cranky peds nurse because you won't have any friends with the kids. So I mean, that was great to start there. So from peds, I, you know, got a pretty good foundation of just basic sort of stuff, which was really good. And then I moved over to emergency halfway through the year, which I was like initially super keen about, because I was like, great, a lot of people are really scared looking after kids. In general, like any adult nurse will tell you that, oh no, as soon as a kid walks in sick, they don't know there's too much scary stuff. So they're like, no. So I was happy to be the new person in emergency and be like, yeah, I can do it. Yay, I can do something. I can be helpful. So I found that really, that was a great thing to have behind me as that little bit extra. Emergency was an absolute whirlwind. I was only in there for 6 months. Sport-wise, you get thrown in and you don't ask questions, you don't know. So it was kind of like I needed a lot of help. And if I didn't ask right there and then, you know, I was already behind. So it was constant. There was days, I'm sure, like Georgia and, you know, those guys would say as well, as soon as, I just completely lost my train of thought.
I think you're talking about asking questions, and if you don't ask,
yeah. Sorry, I had completely out of mind back then.
That's okay.
Asking questions, yeah. You know, you really find a voice in emergency. You have to advocate for your patients. You have to advocate for yourself, and you as a junior, especially, and you know, recognizing that. No, you're not meant to know everything. I particularly didn't know anything. Well, you feel like that anyway. Don't know anything. You need help. You ask questions. The interaction with doctors, it is always scary, but you know, getting over that, being direct, asking questions that are specific to your patients, that sort of thing. I really found there, and obviously, like everyone who's worked in emergency, you have a few really scary things happen, and you debrief, you talk to your colleagues, you try and get around what happened in your head and also what you can do better next time, and you just really, and that's how you learn. Well, that's how I learn anyway, as scary as it is. So emergency and peds collaboratively, and then like that was just a really great start. However, I didn't get the normal, which is also really important, like ward nursing, like in a medical or surgical ward, which is also super duper important to get your foundations. But anyway, that's where I started, and that's where I, which was really good. But there was a couple of instances in emergency that obstetric related, where I completely fell out of my depth, like a lot of things that just walked on through the door and I had to deal with. But baby wise and mum wise, I was like, oh, that's another speciality that, you know, is a whole nother world. And I was really interested in midwifery and that sort of side of it. So I was like, well, I'll apply for my mid-start thing, like Georgia. And moved from Dubbo to Tamworth. Started the 12-month course ago, yeah, so you work 0.8, so 4 days a week, and you work and study full-time. So it's a hell of a year. It's big study and just so much to learn, because Bachelor of Midwifery, probably for the guys who some are listening or whoever, but that's a 3-year course just like nursing. So condensing that into one, and you also do your experiences and your hours of training, whatever, in that year as well. So it is big year, but it's so worth it. And like a lot of nurses, you know, we're practical people, and, you know, you think with, you think on the spot, and also you put yourself in the situation, then you learn from those things. So, you know, learning and working on the job was a perfect way to do it, because I'm a practical person. If I don't see it in front of me, you know, I won't learn it from a book, you know. So it was a great way to do my midwifery, got over and done with in 12 months. And I also had, within that 12 months, I had 6 weeks out in Moree, which was really awesome. 6 weeks, yeah, it went super duper quick. But having that little bit of experience, a little bit of light on how women and how those little hospitals can support women through their antenatal period, and then they have their babies, and then afterwards, like, it's a normal process, which I really love because I like that it's, you know, everyone's been, you know, babies are born. It's a normal thing. Like, so I like that people weren't sick, and if they were, it was abnormal. So you know what I mean, if that makes sense. So Maury was great. You work very closely with GP obstetricians, they're called out there. So they're, you know, you'll go to them for your GP appointment, but they're also run into the hospital for any labour and birth, that sort of thing. They're incredible. But also the midwives out there are awesome. They've got a heap of experience behind them. They're confident in their decisions, and you ask them anything and they're like, no, this is what we're going to do. And they're punchy, and it's great. So I love my time out at Moree. Same as what other guys were saying. It's quiet when it's quiet, and it is so busy when, oh, it's busy. So it was good having a little bit of time there. Got to see some really awesome things. And then, so I finished up in February, my mid-start thingy, which I was very pleased about. And now I'm just in my new grad year as a midwife now in Tamworth, which has been really good, really cool. It's been a nice transition because I've been working with the same girls and doctors for the last year and a half. So, excuse me. So, you know, I've already got that connection with a lot of people, and I feel confident in where I'm at this stage, but have so much to learn, so much. I did a year of it, but I've got at least another 10 before I know what I'm talking about, but until then I'll pretend. But yeah, sorry, that was a lot of rambling. I don't know.
No, that was fantastic. It was a great journey, and I think everyone really enjoyed hearing the progression and how things sort of one thing leads to another, and how it's important to keep asking questions and realise that there's so much learning that we all have to do, even once you are qualified and out in the big world of nursing and midwifery. I'm going to jump back to Georgia. I see there's a question in the chat here. Georgia, would you be able to tell us a little bit how your lifestyle on the North Shore compared to your life as a nurse in the bush, both in Dubbo and in Walgett? And what aspects do you like about rural health, and why are you still where you are?
Well, yeah, it's a smidge different to the North Shore of Sydney, but I think lifestyle-wise, from my experience anyway, the people that I have met along the way are so welcoming and so friendly and just willing to get you involved in whatever's going on, that you can't not have a good time, really. Going straight out to Walgett, being such a small town, I was pretty lucky because I had my sister out there, so I was able to stay with her, and she was able to introduce me to people about town. And even if I didn't have that family support where, like having my sister with me in Walgett, I don't think there would have been any issue with having like a good, fun lifestyle. Like, the nurses at the hospital are so welcoming. They're a really good, fun bunch of people that will just take you under their wing and not only teach you nursing, but teach you fun lifestyle things. But yeah, I think it's also a bit more cruisy in a way, the lifestyle. Like, Sydney's hustle bustle, everyone's got to get from A to B as soon as they can, and if you're in their way, you're going to hear about it. But this, like out here, you just get there when you get there. Like, everyone's a bit more relaxed, and yeah, I don't know, it's just, I don't know what it is, but I feel more relaxed out here, and I am so much happier out west than I was in Sydney. It's just such a nice change and such a nice find, I think. I think I was very lucky to have the experience I've had and, you know, find something that I love what I do. I've got a good social network out here now that I've built, and I can't really see myself going back to Sydney for a long time.
Oh, that's so good to hear. Thanks for sharing that, George. Now, I think we've got a question here from Daisy, and I think, Harry, you might be able to answer this one for us. So, Do you know how the rural remote exchange program works?
Yeah, I was actually just typing out the question. I had a few friends do the Metro Rural Exchange that I'm still friends with now. I know in 2019, for example, all the Metro Rural Exchanges were 6 months and 6 months. I had one friend do 6 months in Walgett, or Walgett, as she called it, and then 6 months at RPA. And my other friend did 6 months in Broken Hill Medical and 6 months in St. George, I believe. Oh no, sorry, my apologies, Gosford. So 6 months Broken Hill Medical, 6 months Gosford Medical. She's now back out here in charge of the medical ward in her second year. She met some really nice people out here and wanted to come back, and that's her. My other friend who did 6 months in Walgett and RPA is now working in Grenfell MPS and is sometimes doing in-charge shifts there as well. I know from those two guys, they loved it. They had the absolute best time. Another colleague actually of mine last year, she missed out on it, but luckily she got the opportunity to do something similar, but was both two rural placements, one in a smaller town and then one in a bigger town. So.
Fantastic. Thanks for that. Daisy, if you want anything more clarified, just post it back into the chat. I think we've now got a question here from Emily. So this is for Prue. Do you wish you had experienced working in a smaller centre during your new grad rather than being in Dubbo the whole time?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, well, having grown up in like a bit of a small town, I understood. I mean, I haven't worked in Walgett or something, well, another place that is as small as that, other than working in Moree. But as a new grad, Dubbo was a good mix. Like, it was a good middle ground, I felt. And those rural exchange programs, like Harry was just saying, that was, you know, a similar sort of thing. You get the big hospital and you get the super duper small hospital, but Dubbo was in the middle, which I found really cool in the sense that we serviced a lot of outback places like Walgett. So a lot of people, like George was saying, would get sent from, you know, having a heart attack straight to Dubbo and would receive a lot of people, but would also, some things were too big for us as well. So we'd send out as well. So having that middle ground was really awesome in the sense that you understand how hospitals work and also, you know, the acuity of patients and where they need to go. But I enjoy Dubbo. It's like any of those medium-sized towns. Like Tamworth is pretty similar, sort of, you know, 60,000 people. It's still a big hospital. But no, I really enjoyed it. Really, really enjoyed it. Would highly recommend any with both. But also, you know, you get to know the smaller towns as well in those medium hospitals because, you know, you're receiving patients from those rural areas. You get to know them. You get to kind of hear their stories, and it's different, different sort of people, and also usually accidents and that sort of thing that you're dealing with as well, just from the lifestyle differences, really. So no, I loved Dubbo. It was great. Yeah, I hope that answered your question.
Fantastic. That was really good. Now I've had a question sent through. So where a lot of you guys have worked, there's obviously quite high Indigenous populations. How did you find that starting as non-Indigenous clinicians to begin with? And what would be your advice about culturally sensitive and culturally responsive care? And did you do any sort of training in that area before you started?
I could say something if you want, Pip.
Go for it. It's open for all.
So, yeah, going straight out to Walgett, very high Indigenous population. And part of my orientation that I did out there was we actually spent the day with the Aboriginal health worker, and he took us out throughout Walgett, took us to lots of the local sites to see, say there was lots of, what was it called, kind of camps where most of the Indigenous population would stay. So we could see those, and there was carvings in the trees that he was showing us, and telling us, you know, what different Indigenous words mean that were seen around town, and showing us the rivers throughout Walgett, which have Indigenous names and what they mean. And yeah, so we spent a bit of time doing that with him, which was really interesting. And then again, here in Dubbo, we've had to do part of mandatory training, of course, is respecting the difference. So that was a full day course again about Indigenous culture and how we can best support and respect Indigenous people throughout our practice, making sure they get the care that they need that may be different from someone like, you know, you or me, and making sure that we can best support them in ways that are culturally sensitive for them.
Thanks, that was great. Yeah, I know that New South Wales Health makes sure that all their staff, regardless of what discipline they come from, are doing mandatory training. And I think it's something I learned when I was nursing, is a lot of it's about what you decide to learn along the way, and how much you engage in things and actively look up your own things regarding the communities and Indigenous populations that you may encounter when you're working in areas. So I think that's really interesting. Okay, so we've got another question here in the chat from Emily. So this is for Prue or Georgia. So do you have a good mix of practice between midwifery and nursing, or do you practice more of one than the other? Probably, Prue, you could start with actually just now moving into the area and where you'd like to go and what you're experiencing.
Yeah, sure. So I found that just having that, although it was brief, like I only finished my new grad year, I don't have a great deal of experience, but just having that little bit of background knowledge, and also just background confidence from experiencing just, you know, knowing how hospitals work and working in a hospital, having that little bit of nursing experience going into midwifery was hugely helpful. As simple as, you know, a lot of midwives don't use a lot of the antibiotics that nurses do, for example, or just like the general, I don't know, interplay of other physiologist stuff that can affect a woman when she's having a baby. Just having that little bit of background knowledge was really, really helpful going into MIDI. Now practicing more as a midwife, I'm working on the maternity ward and about to do a rotation through birth suite, which will be awesome. But I'm definitely more of a midwife than a nurse per se. It's been, I would like to have a bit more experience in intensive care and go back to emergency, because a lot of the time, you know, obstetric emergencies are high pressure situations and also life-threatening, obviously. So it's great to have all the experience and background knowledge from, you know, intensive care, emergency, that sort of thing, to carry with you. So I definitely want to try and cross back over that at some point of my career. But at this stage, I'm just trying to get my head around the whole MIDI thing, being a midwife. You know, there's so much to it antenatally, intrapartum when they're having the baby, and then after, like, it's just a whole different ball game in itself. Like, it's a massive, massive thing. So for me, midwife for now, maybe emergency intensive nurse, hopefully a bit later, but that's where I'm up to at the moment. Hope that answered the question.
No, that's great. George, did you want to add anything?
Yeah. So my background with, well, I'll go say my second half of my new grad was in the general medical ward here in Dubbo. So I got some good nursing experience there, 30-bed ward, flat chat all the time, getting your time management and your priorities kind of down pat before anything else. But then now moving into maternity and things, like you still get, we call them, we'd say general patients. They may be of a gynecological background, but they're still treated as a general patient. And so they're still technically, you're a nurse to them rather than a midwife. So you still get to dabble while you're still working maternity, and also while you work, whenever we work in special care, we're counted as nurses rather than midwives. So that, because you've worked so hard to get a 3-year nursing degree, you don't want to just put it in the bin. So like there's ways that you can keep both nursing and midwifery going. And personally for myself, I've discovered that I find babies the most interesting things ever, and they're incredible what they can go through and recover from. So I want to keep my hat in that ring a little bit. And so eventually, maybe I'll give myself 5 minutes after I finish this MIDI course that I might do a certificate in special care nursing, just to, you know, keep learning and keep my nursing going, as well as keep the MIDI going as well. So there's definitely options where you can make sure you're getting the best of both worlds, I think.
Fantastic. Thanks so much. So I know a lot of people are probably thinking it's going to be quite a nerve-wracking year. And I know from my own experiences and all of yours that it can be quite tough. Now, Harry, can you tell us a little bit about how you looked after yourself and how did you sort of manage the work-life balance? You know, did you employ certain self-care things that you like to do, or let your brain just go elsewhere, or what did you do to really make sure that those tricky days when you weren't sure about things and you felt a bit stressed after work, what did you do?
Wilcannia was really easy because if things, I'll say the Q word, if things did quieten down later after the shift, I'd often just pop back and have a chat to the senior nurse taking over shift and debrief. Luckily, I was living with a new grad while in Wilcannia. I actually met him on a previous placement too, which really helped, and we lived together for 6 months. He's now in Griffith ICU, and he was here this weekend, which was really cool. But him and I really bonded, and we chatted quite a lot. The educators that coordinated the program said they did that on purpose, and our feedback saying that the new graduates together helped our learning and our coping. Not that it was hard to cope, but putting us together really helped. So they decided to put three out there at the moment in Wilcannia and PS swapping over. I was lucky that my partner lived in Broken Hill, which is just under 2 hours away. So on days off, the manager was really good and grouped my days off together and usually ended me on an AM in time to drive home safely to Broken Hill in the daylight, and then rossed me back on a PM so I could drive back that morning, so I could stay at home and then go to work that day. It was really good too because there was a half-hour difference between Wilcannia and Broken Hill being the only central time zone in New South Wales. So it was quite funny losing half an hour and gaining half an hour depending on what I was doing. So it meant I could make it for dinner if I finished work at 3 in Wilcannia, because I'd get back at 4:30ish. But coping was easy thanks to my colleague new grads and nursing colleagues and the internet. It was, yeah, it's pretty good getting free Wi-Fi and calling fam if need be and going from there.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Harry. Do you guys want to add to that about how, I know, Wink, you've got quite an interesting sort of on the side little passion that keeps you sane. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that and how it sort of complements your stressful nursing life?
Sure. So I think you'd go mad if you just were only had, you know, your job and nursing to go to and come home to something else. So I play a bit of music. I like playing guitar and that sort of thing, which is great. Just something, you just need something to survive in a rural place, or to survive at your new grad year. You have to look after yourself. They say, the educators say that so much at the start, but until you're doing it and you're halfway through and you go, God, I'm tired, you just realise that, oh, they actually meant what they said. Like, you have to look after yourself. You have to, do nice things for yourself. Go for walks, go play, see your mates, go for coffee, treat yourself wherever you can and whatever you need to. Just absolutely just look after yourself. And yeah, I'm lucky enough that I can play a bit of guitar, and if that's what you guys or any of you like to do, it absolutely helps. Just having something completely different. And I'm lucky enough to have a few horses as well, so I do that as well on the side, which I would go absolutely mental with that. So yeah, all the hobbies and all the extra bits are so important when you're keeping to keep staying through your new grad year, even if it's as simple as reading or just listening to music, like all that extra stuff just to turn your mind off about your job. That's what's really important, just to have that extra, that's something just to turn off and switch to. Definitely very important.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think that's great advice. And just know you always have someone else out there who probably has a similar question or is struggling at the same time. So really do reach out. RDN's always here, but your peers will be there for you as well. So it's an exciting time, but there will be tough days. So I'll quickly jump back to Harry. There's a question here. I know Harry might be able to answer it. Steph missed the question about FLEC. Do you want to just go through that, Harry? I think she was just wondering what it is and how it relates to your scope of practice.
Yeah, so FLEC is first line emergency care course. It's for any, it's very common in the Far West Health District, the Western Health District, and I think maybe Murrumbidgee and Hunter, New England as well. It's basically a bunch of extra training and standing orders specific to areas that don't have highly trained and or just any trained doctors on site. It's a standing order is basically something that's there for a certain indication, like a nurse initiated medicine, such as like paracetamol or something like that, and includes different medicines for different things. So I know in the case of chest pain, you can self-administer GTN or anginine. Also morphine for chest pain as well, as it's indicated on our chest pain pathway and things like that. I haven't done it as I did it only 6 months in Wilcannia, and it's only for the senior in-charge nurses in Wilcannia as per the infrastructure there. But I know it's a lot more common in Western, and a lot of people do it. And I hear it's a pretty amazing course. I did look through a little bit of it, you know, on very calm night shifts, we'll say, but it's really good. Yeah, so if you want to look it up, it's FLECC, New South Wales Health.
Fantastic. Thanks, Harry. And if you guys decide on doing your new grad in New South Wales, you can definitely inquire and see if you can sort of do that once you've completed your grad. But if you go elsewhere and end up doing rural in either Victoria or another state or something, there will also be an equivalent. So make sure you ask your educators and look into those opportunities if they arise. So the next question that I've seen pop up is, do any of you, this is for all of you, feel that you may have missed out on anything by going rural? Do you feel that maybe clinically or, you know, anything really that you may have missed out on or were disadvantaged by?
I can answer a little bit of that. I working in places like Moree or Walgett, for example, or Dubbo, Tamworth, wherever, the rural, big or small rural, it's definitely not a miss out thing or anything like that. If anything, I reckon those places you learn twice as much as what you could in a big hospital. I say that in the sense that because there is such limited resources and also just people to help out, you are kind of like, forced into situations where sometimes you would rather sit back and be like, oh, well, that's too scary. I don't know what I'm doing. But it's, you know, emergency wise, it doesn't matter if you're a scribe or it doesn't matter if you're someone just being the runner. You know, being a part of those situations, you learn, and being in a rural area, you are forced to be in a part of those situations. Doesn't matter what role you have, big and small. So if anything, you're forced to participate, and you, in the nicest, like I mean that in the best way possible. You've got great support there. Your team members know your scope and know that you're junior and know that you aren't meant to know anything. So, so with that saying that, they know where you're up to, and you just learn so much because you're not usually in big hospitals. You would often just sit back and be in the background and go, oh, luckily I had those other two nurses there to take over what you know, my situation where none of that, you just have to do it. Great involvement from the doctors, that sort of thing. So if anything, I reckon you would learn a lot more and be forced to, you know, go out of your comfort zone, not scope of practice, but your comfort zone within your scope, obviously. Yeah, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's great. Do you guys want to add a little bit from your experiences?
Yeah, after chatting to a friend in Wollongong ED, I think one thing that I missed out in my new grad year was seeing gold standard best practice as per evidence in front of me. It might be a bit hard to explain, but if you look at the evidence for like chest pain, for example, the best thing you can do is go to a metro hospital and get PCI. And nowhere would it say you present to Broken Hill and then you get treated with thrombolytic medication, then you wait for a plane to pick you up and then hand over the patient to the RFDS and then fly them to Adelaide or Dubbo, for example. Even though you're fully in control of that whole journey for that patient, I know in the city hospitals, some chest pain patients don't even enter ED. So just examples like that, just I think knowing how it works, even though you might not even see it if you work in a Sydney hospital, or you might not even be a part of the care for that patient. I think knowing how things roll in a metro hospital, even if you're only there for a couple of weeks, would be beneficial. Although I think my experience has been, I've been a lot bigger part of really interesting cases and seeing a patient off and seeing the whole journey for a patient in rural centres is really awesome, and I've learnt a lot doing that in comparison to that friend I spoke about in Wollongong ED.
Fantastic. And you, George?
I think the other two have pretty well touched on the clinical side of things, but in the way that you say missing out on stuff, I think moving to a rural area from a metro area, like you're not missing much. I really say it is what you make it. Yes, you may be 5 hours away from where your family and friends are, but you've got days off. You just jump in the car, you go see them. Like it's not a big drama, and you're not like, you can organise it so you can get home for events or anything like that. But I definitely feel like I haven't missed out on anything family or friends wise back at home, and I definitely haven't missed out on anything clinical. Even like saying in a metro hospital, if you're on, say, a general medical ward, that's where you are. But where if you're in a rural area and you're working ED, you've got a bit of everything. You've got your residential aged care as well. You dabble, so it's not like you're stuck in one area. You get to see it all. You kind of get a feel of where you may like to go from particular patients that you may see throughout. So rural's the way to go, I reckon.
Awesome, that's great. Okay, so we've just, Joe's put a question up here. Now, if you guys can answer, that's great. If not, I have a response also, Joe. So Joe said, I'm not based in New South Wales, but would like to undertake a grad program in a rural area. How often do interstate applicants get a New South Wales grad position? Anyone want to have a go?
Yeah, I'll have a go. Best thing about applying interstate is it's a separate application and it doesn't null your application for your own state. So there's no harm in applying for every state in Australia. If anything, you're just going to boost your opportunity for getting a job, and a really good job in that case. A lot of my friends applied for the ACT Health, New South Wales and Queensland and Victoria. So they were pretty busy, but all of the organisations actually talk to each other and make sure the new grad interviews and applications don't overlap to a certain extent. And I know all my friends got to all of them. So definitely go for it.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. And Joe, if you like, I think my email's up there somewhere. I'm more than happy to to send you the handbook or other things which may have a bit more information on sort of how to apply as an interstate participant. But you have all the opportunities out there, and in a rural area, I think it's absolutely no hindrance to your application at all. So I think, yeah, I totally agree with Harry. Okay, so I've just seen another question pop up. I think this is for Prue. How many hours per week do midwifery grads do in rural settings?
Midwifery grad. So totally up to you, I suppose. Throughout the mid-start program, it was 0.8, so just 4 days a week, whether it be 6 one and then 2 the next, or within the fortnight, 8 shifts. But for the moment, I am still 0.8, but about to go up to full time. So it's totally up to you and what you want to do and how much, and what your facility is happy with. The guys my manager and stuff are happy to keep it around. So they're like, if you want to go 0.8 and we keep you, that's great. So that's what I've done. But I'm about to move up to full time and do that sort of thing. So it's one of those things. If you don't cope with full-time work and you want to do something else, or you've got something else to do as well work-wise, then you can do 0.7. I don't know. It's more of a manager's sort of kind of decision with that one. But where I am, 0.8 at the moment. Yeah, it's great.
Fantastic. Okay, so we'll probably wrap up in a little bit. Before we do, I'll just like to remind everyone that we will be sending out a thank you email again, and in it will be a link to the survey. So it'd be great if everyone could just jump on and give us a little bit of feedback, because everything we hear, we're trying to build on and make sure these sort of initiatives and events are doing the best thing we can to support you all and make sure we keep improving. But before we do end, I'd just like to ask you all, where to next? Your journey so far in such a short period of time have been so inspiring and so amazing and full of action and lots of different things. Where do all your journeys take you next? Hopefully rural. We'll kickstart with Harry. We'll go back through the same order initially. So Harry, George, then Prue.
Pretty much exactly where I am, which is really cool. Starting a grad cert in critical care, specialising in emergency, starting in July. Been doing heaps of different packages and learning lots more. And I'm actually transitioning into the resus area of the emergency department, which is a bit scary for a junior nurse. Although it's really good for my career, and I'm caring for some really complex patients and things. I'm really happy with how my work's been going. And then from there, I might step up to still a rural hospital, but a little bit of a bigger one. Example like Dubbo or potentially Orange. A really good resource as well if you're looking at roughly what size a hospital is and what resources it has, is if you search on Google New South Wales Health hospital levels, there's a document that shows all the different levels from 1 to 6 of all the hospitals in New South Wales. To put it in perspective, Broken Hill's a 3, and it's got a fair bit of staff, medical ward, surgical ward, obstetrics, maternity, special care nursery, an ED with 9 beds, which is pretty impressive, up to Dubbo, which is level 5, and New Metro Hospitals, which is level 6. So there's lots of rural hospitals out there, and a few metro hospitals as well that are catching my eye, but I think I'm staying rural.
Fantastic. Thanks, Harry. What about you, George?
Well, I touched on it a bit before. Like, don't think I've finished studying yet. I think next is to learn more about the neonate itself. For me, I just think they're the most amazing little things that can, drop their bundle in a minute, but then pick it right back up. They're just spectacular little beings. But I think for now, I'm pretty well set that I'm staying rural. I think from the very first placement as a student that I did in a rural setting, I knew I wasn't going to be a metro nurse or a metro midwife. I think the plan was to initially go back to Sydney and do a bit of work there, but it's not looking good that way. I think I'll just stay put for now. Dubbo itself is a really good base centre, and I've found that here I've got really good support. I've built up a really good social network here as well, so it's not like I'm isolated at all, because I don't have any family in Dubbo, but that's fine. I've made my own little family out here, and as I said, it's just so easy to duck here, there and everywhere on your days off to see who you need to see and keep in touch. But yeah, I don't know if I have a set plan, but rural's the go, and I'll probably stay put in Dubbo for a little while just to consolidate my midwifery, just because as Prue said before, that I've worked with the midwives here for the last 12 months, so I know them, I know the educator, they know me, they know where I'm at, so it's just easy to continue on and consolidate that way. And yeah, give me a little bit and then I'll know where I'm going next.
Fantastic, thank you so much. And what about you, Prue? Where to next?
So for the moment, I'll be sticking around Tamworth, trying to get cram as much into my new grad midwifery year as I possibly can, through all the different areas, antenatal, birth suite, postnatal, and even a bit of time in special care nursery. So that will be more than enough for my brain, but I will be sticking around till about October or so, and then I think I'm going to move back home to Walgett for a little while, so I'll be kicking out the MPS there, so if they give me a job, a few extra shifts back at home, which I'm really looking forward to, because they're a great bunch of girls and are super fun. I know they're great to work with, so I'll do that. And then from there, next year, I don't know, it's a bit of a mystery with everything that's going on. I would actually like to get back to a bigger hospital. I say that in the sense that I've done a couple of rural things now, so I'd like to go to where we send our women off to. I'd like to be the receiving end, whether it be Brisbane or Sydney, in the hopes to try and learn as much as I possibly can there to bring back to the rural sort of setting. So, or even overseas. I don't know. Endless possibility. It'll be good. Either way, lots of fun, lots of learning to do. Anyway.
Fantastic. That's so good. Well, thank you guys all so much for joining and sharing your stories as new grads in the bush. I'm sure everyone's really enjoyed having you on, and the questions have been fantastic.